guys? We are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy show, the recap show, the After the Bell show. We are recapping UFC Smith versus Clark that just went down. Ended about a half hour ago. It originally wasn't supposed to be Smith versus Clark. It was originally supposed to be Blades versus Lewis, but one day before the event was supposed to go down, Curtis Blades tested positive for COVID-19. That fight was scrapped, and instead we have Anthony Smith versus Devin Clark. My name is Keith Shillan. I am the host of this show. I'll be joined by Ben Duffy in a minute. The show is being brought to you by the Sherdog Radio Network and the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. Ben, I know you were really excited for the main event. I know you were, you took a stand. You were making a big upset pick in Derek Lewis over Curtis Blades. What was your thoughts when you found the news that fight was not happening?
Well, my initial thought was, oh shit. Just because this card had already lost one of its most interesting fights, earlier in the week. So, for it to lose its main event, luckily, Anthony Smith was exactly the type of fighter who, they said on the broadcast tonight, I think this was his 7th headlining spot. So no stranger to 5-round fights, no stranger to being the main event. And of course, he and Devin Clark are exactly the type of fighters who would, agree to make it a 5-round fight. So it went as smoothly as possible, but yeah, it was a huge blow. This is the kind of thing that they've canceled cards for, in the past.
Yeah, if it was a pay-per-view or something, I think there'd be a lot more, argument for a cancellation or not putting it on. Being that it was I don't want to say free card because you still have to pay for ESPN Plus or cable to have ESPN, but basically a free event. I was okay with them just bumping up Smith versus Clark. As you mentioned, Smith has headlined many UFCs. He continued his streak of headlining UFC cards. Devin Clark making his first appearance in a main event. You already mentioned it. The big news was not only did these guys get bumped from the co-main event to the main event, they both agreed to make it a 5-round fight, though that wasn't the case. But they did agree on it. What was your thoughts when you heard that?
I was excited. Because when we're talking about high-level fighters, which both Smith and Clark are, I want to see them in a 5-round fight. That it just has more of a big fight feel. You learn more about both fighters. So yeah, I'm always a fan of more 5-round fights, unless it's just mediocre fighters or especially mediocre heavyweights.
Yeah, no, I totally agreed. Did you think it would have favored one fight or the other, adding those 2 extra rounds?
I did. I did think it would favor Smith, just as the fighter who cuts less weight, has more 5-round fight experience. We had not seen gas be a glaring problem for Clark in the past, but you never know. He's a really muscular guy, a guy who depends on a lot of power and explosion. So I figured if it went into the later rounds, that would favor Smith.
Yeah, I agree, just based on the experience. So let's get right into it. Anthony Smith did defeat Devin Clark. He submitted him by first-round submission. I'm just going to break down the action. Smith came out like a bat out of hell, closing the distance like he does, swinging for the fences. He clipped Smith. Smith actually grabbed double underhooks, took Clark down, which I don't think many people expected. At one point, he briefly had his back. He almost had a twister in his legs were entangled, and he was looking for the twister. When Clark was able to break himself free, end up on top where, he probably wanted to be anyways, suddenly Smith locked on a triangle choke, cut the corner with a triangle choke, and forced Clark to tap out in the first round. We both picked Smith heading into this fight, but I think I can say neither one of us were excited about him as a return to the top of the division, one of the top guys in the division. Did this, fairly easy win for him, did this change your opinion about him going forward?
In some ways it did. Now, we're going to get to matchmaking soon, and just because of the way things are playing out in the division right now, I'm going to probably put up recommendations of him against people who are currently ranked lower than him, but it's not because he didn't look good. He did really exactly the best thing he could have. He just, outclassed a rising prospect and definitely showed levels to things. He showed an amount of poise once it hit the ground. It just felt to me as though he was a step ahead in every situation and every position for the 2.5 minutes the fight lasted. Like he outclassed a very promising and very dangerous fighter. Like that's what you're supposed to do if you're on a losing streak and you want to prove you're still top 10 material. This is what people can point to, or he'll be able to point to if a year down the road he's on the cusp of another title shot.
Yeah, everything you said, I totally agree with. You kind of have two things when a guy's on a losing streak. You ask, well, did they lose because they just faced really good competition, or are they done? And I think at this point, based on what he did to a rising prospect, as you said, is he proved that he just lost to good competition. Alexander Rakic, Glover Teixeira, John Jones, his last 4 fights, those are the 3 guys he lost to. When he faced a guy lower level, he ran right through him. So I don't feel better about Anthony Smith returning to title contention. Am I confident about that? No. But I don't feel like he's absolute toast, which was definitely a question. We both picked him, so I don't think we were both calling him toast. But I was picking him with a lot less confidence that I would have picked him a year ago. I think we even said that on the breakdown show.
Yeah.
So let's get right to it. I don't have really that much to say about this fight based on it was a very quick fight. It was not supposed to be the main event. It was supposed to originally be the co-main event. Didn't really do much at all for the rankings. So let's get into Smith. We talked about return matchups. I wrote down a name who I'd like to, if I was in charge, I would put him against. I think makes sense. But then I went to social media, and it seems like everybody's calling him out. Luke Rockhold is kind of, he's been on and off again with retirement, but they have a back history where they've been wanting to fight each other for years. Jim Crute kind of called for a fight with him. Paul Craig called for a fight with him. I like all 3 of those matchups, but the guy that I wrote down was Nikita Krylov. Simply from a ranking sense, he's ranked number 8 in the UFC rankings. He's ranked number 15th in our Sherdog rankings. Obviously, there's a gap difference because we at Sherdog, we rank all the fighters from all across multiple organizations. So Bellator's in there, Rising's in there, whatever. So ours obviously will be a little different. What would you do with Anthony Smith?
The first thing that came to mind was Krylov, but the thing is, he was supposed to fight right around now anyway. He hasn't fought since March, so unless Smith wants to make a real quick turnaround, which he can, I mean, there's not a mark on him, and he doesn't cut weight to get to 205, so he could fight Krylov in 2 weeks if he wanted to. But I don't know if that'll work out timing-wise. So the names that came to mind for me were Crute, Craig, and Magomed Ankalaev. Those are 3 guys, Crute, Craig, and Ankalaev are all guys that have done enough to merit a shot at a top 10 or top 15 guy. And in Crute's case, another shot because he did fight Misha Serkinov a while back. But any of those 3 guys would be fine with me. Not Craig, just because I'm still bitter at him for the Shogun fight last week. So one of the other 2.
Yeah, so let's talk about Smith for a second. You said that the only way the Krylov fight happens if he does a real quick turnaround, but that's something Smith actually has done in the past. When we go back to when he beat Rashad Evans, a month later he took a fight with Shogun. 3 months after that, he took a fight with Usman. 5 months later, he's taking John Jones. So in less than a year, he had 4 fights against top guys in the division. Mm-hmm. Even 3 months after that, he went against Gustafsson. And it wasn't until after the Gustafsson win that he had a big time off. And so I could see him wanting a quick turnaround, just because it seems like the kind of fighter he is. Not to mention that he's 32 years old and he has 50 fights already. So he's a guy who likes to stay active. But I want to talk about your list. You mentioned Crute, Craig, and Ankalaev.
Yep.
I'm going to put you on the stand. You're the matchmaker. You can only pick one. Which one are you picking?
If I'm the matchmaker, I'm probably going with Ankalaev because as the matchmaker, I think Ankalaev can win, and I want to put the guy over.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do too. I would rank him like this: Ankalaev, Crute, Craig, simply because the other two, I feel like there's a gap between them two and then Craig for the good of the company. You know, me and you are both big on Ankalaev. We both talked about him fighting for a title one day, possibly being a champion one day. I'm assuming we both would favor him over Smith right now.
I would, but man, it's not as much of a walkover as I would have thought it was a week ago.
No, yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you on that. So, but you know, that would be a really good tough test for him if he got past Smith. Obviously, he'd be kind of like the new kid on the block. He'd be the new shiny toy in the top of the rankings. Crute, so young, it would be his first test against a big top, contender, former title challenger, and then Craig. To me, Craig is what he is. So I would look at facing Craig more about rebuilding Smith than building up Craig.
Yeah, I would think of Smith as a pretty dreadful style matchup for Craig.
Yeah, but now if Craig won, obviously that changed it. But I agree. I think Smith would be a terrible stylistic matchup. It's. I don't know if I've ever done it this short, but is there anything else to talk about in the main event?
No, not really. I mean, it was a 2.5 minute fight.
Yeah.
Spent more than that talking about it.
Yeah. Before that, the co-main event was a fight that both of us were very excited about. Didn't go how either one of us predict. Just for the record, we like to toot our own horns when we did well. I think we both went 4-6 on the even.
Something like that. I was actually thinking the same thing where I was not looking forward to getting on the horn tonight and taking my medicine because, yeah, I did not have a good night. And you and I were the same on a lot of the picks. Yeah. And we were each, wrong on a couple of, ones that the other was right on. So,
yeah, we did get a couple of the underdog ones. One of the underdog that we both agreed on was Takashi Sato beating Miguel Baeza, and man, were we wrong. Baeza looked great. He got a second round submission. I'll talk about Sato first. I hated his strategy. This is the guy that he has a wrestling background, and that opens up his striking. He needs to use his wrestling more. But also, he just was not letting his hands go. And when he did, it was just the same combination over again. Jab, overhand left. Jab, overhand left. Baeza, on the other hand, was working from range. He was adding in kicks, jabs. And it seemed like they both were, as the fight went on, they both were going in opposite directions to me. Like Sato looked like he was getting more and more uncomfortable, and Baeza, it seemed like he was getting more and more comfortable. Like he was starting to feel himself. When he added in the takedown, eventually added in the head and arm choke, finished it. It was just a good showing for him.
I agree. It's, along with Smith, might have been the most impressive individual performance of the night. I had Sato in this. I understood why he was an underdog, but I thought I saw some things in the Baeza versus Brown fight that gave me pause. Just I saw Baeza being a little too open defensively, getting hit a little too much by a very worn Matt Brown, and I thought those were things that Sato would be able to take advantage of. And I just figured I'd take the chance on him being able to run Baeza onto just a really clean punch. That didn't happen. Baeza looked great from the beginning. I liked his kicks right away. They landed, and I'm sure they hurt, but they also seemed to give Sato something to think about right away.
Yeah.
He rarely, if ever, tried to counter them. And for the first round, even though he was the guy coming forward, he was just coming forward and like getting tuned up.
Yeah, no, it was just not a good performance. And I just think having no variety in his attacks definitely did not do him any good. So let's talk about Baeza for a second. This guy is now 10-0. What do we got him? How do you feel about him moving forward?
I feel good about him. He's 10-0. He's finished his all three fights in the UFC. They've all been good fighters. Like he's not, crept into even probably a top 20 opponent or 25 opponent. This is the most crowded division at that level, but he's passed every test. He's looked fantastic, and he's shown different wrinkles each time out. He's not just a wild brawler. He's not just a kickboxer. I thought his finish in this fight was sensational.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It was opportunistic instead of trying to force a submission just to prove a point. There's no doubt in my mind that if Sato had rolled a different way, Baeza would have just kept like hitting him with punches and elbows and finished him that way. He just seems like a finisher.
Yeah, no, he looked great. I mean, but my thing about him is he's in, if not the best division in the UFC, one of the best divisions. We think about a division that, I mean, Leon Edwards has still not got a title shot, and he had to win. I mean, I don't even know what his winning streak is, but it's like 10 or 12 or something, and he's going against really good guys. So the broadcast crew was talking about him facing top 10, top 15 guys next, and I'm like, wait a second. There's guys who are also undefeated, who's beaten really good guys and is still on the outside, haven't got top 10 guys. So I'm excited to see him going forward. I feel a lot better about him now than I did on Wednesday when we made our picks. But I wanna caution to pump the brakes a little bit, because that is a really loaded division.
Oh, it's extremely loaded. When you talk about a top, 15 opponent, I mean, think of some of the people who were not in the top 15. Santiago Ponzinibbio, Nico Price, Vicente Luque, like really good, dangerous, complete fighters that are on the outside of the top 15 looking in.
Yeah.
So, if he wins his next two fights like this, like I would say if he wins his next fight in similarly convincing fashion, then I'm going to want to see him against like a Bilal Muhammad or Vicente Luque type, an Alex Morono type who just barely fought. Yeah.
That's funny, because that's like the exact guy I was thinking of when you Bilal Muhammad. I'm like, if he wants to take on a guy on the next tier down, not ranked, yeah, I'm okay with that. Maybe not Bilal Muhammad, because I feel like Bilal Muhammad has done enough to garner the step up against the top 15 guys, but maybe that guy just below that, I think would make sense. You ready to move on to the next fight?
Absolutely.
All right, we have Josh Parisian versus Parker Porter in the required heavyweight main card bout.
And I got a 264-pound plate of crow in front of me that I'm ready to eat here.
Me and you both, because nobody was talking more trash about Parker Porter than I am. So Parker Porter wins by unanimous decision. The scorecards were 30-26, 30-27, 29-28. This was, I don't know. I didn't want to go. Go ahead.
Parisian looked awful. Okay. Coming into this, I thought Porter might have been better than he showed, but just based on what I'd seen of Parisian on Contender Series, I was like, Josh Parisian is already better than a handful of UFC heavyweights. I thought it was a travesty he hadn't gotten a shot yet. So just based solely on that, I expected him to walk right over Porter. And instead, he looked worse than he had in any of his previous fights that I'd seen.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it was one of these octagon jitters. He finally got his chance. The first round, he didn't look terrible. Porter really surprised him, because Porter came out to fight. I mean, I know that's such a cliche thing to say, but the way he came out, he was looking for a knockout instantly. He was backing Parisian up. He was throwing bombs. Then Parisian kind of gathered himself, and he rocked Porter for a second, and he went all in, knock him out. He threw like 100 punches and completely gassed himself out. But it still seemed very early in the fight to gas yourself out, which makes me feel like a lot of it was an adrenaline dump too. Do you agree or disagree?
I do agree. In fact, it turns out we probably, and by we I just mean general we, should have given Porter a little more of a pass for his first octagon appearance, and maybe we need to for Parisian as well, because a truly good gas tank is rare in the heavyweight division, but there was no reason to believe that Parisian's cardio was that bad going into this. So I do suspect it might have just been adrenaline.
Yeah. So one thing I'll say about Parisian, now the commentating team made this sound like Cub Swanson, Duho Choi. These guys are swinging for them. It was a entertaining low level heavyweight. Like is like I always say, like there's a certain level to a fighter and skill set. Like you could have a rock'em sock'em robot match, but you need a little level of skill set, which these guys didn't have. That kind of always caps my excitement for for these guys. So this was the best it could be for their level, and definitely the best it could be with Josh Parisian absolutely gassed out. But I'll give Josh credit because even though he was gassed out, he was still trying to win the fight.
He was still trying to win the fight, and Porter was trying as hard as he could to finish it, and it didn't happen. So, I mean, credit to Parisian. He gutted it out when he clearly was running on fumes.
Yeah, and Porter just dug deeper and had better leg kicks. I didn't think Parker Porter was a UFC level fighter. I said that many times. I've seen him locally many times. I just didn't believe that. That said, I'm not excited about him going forward. I don't think he's going to win many matches in UFC, but I am I'm happy to eat some crow because I like the story. I like the story about a guy who's been just on the regional scene for 15 years. Was a long shot to even get the call to UFC, got the call, lost, but even bigger long shot to win a match in UFC. So regardless where his career goes, it's nice for the rest of his life he can say he got to win the UFC.
Yep. I mean, can't say any better than that, man. Congratulations, and he's gonna get at least another fight or two now. So who will see what happens.
Yeah, usually they give him you have to lose 2 in a row at least to get cut. So he probably gave himself another 6 months in the UFC at least. Before that, we had Spike Carlisle versus Bill Algeo. This was the fight that both of us were. I think both of us were calling fight of the night. Did you also call it fight of the night?
Yep.
Okay. Do we know by any chance what actually got the fight of the night?
Let me.
All right.
Yep. Okay. Your bonus winners are Anthony Smith,
of course,
Miguel Baeza,
okay,
Sue Mudarji, and Nate Manis.
Okay, so no fight of the night.
Nope.
Okay. If anything did get for the night, I think might have been the heavyweight one, as sad as that is. If not, this one was the one that really, to me, was probably the most entertaining fight. Spike Carlisle. To his credit, he saw what he did wrong in the Billy Quincello fight, which was not conserve his energy. And I felt like he tried, especially very early on, to have a more controlled chaos for the first minute. And then when Algie started landing some kicks to the body, leg kicks, then all that went out the window and he turned into Wildman again with some really great scrambles. The highlight of the fight was, in my opinion, in the first round, Spike Carlisle had Bill Algeo in the very rare Bulldog choke that looked extremely tight. I thought he was going to tap out. But I just really like Bill Algeo's game. This is the guy that I just asked about Miguel Baeza, how you feel about Miguel Baeza. I feel better about Bill Algeo than Miguel Baeza. And Baeza is undefeated. Algeo has 5 losses. Obviously, they're 2 different weight classes, but I like everything about Algeo's game. He's well rounded. He's long and lengthy. Good striking. Good submission threat. Good IQ. Do you agree with me? Are you on the Algeo hype train like I am, or? And I'm not saying this guy's gonna win the title. I like him.
I'll say this: he's been improving. I mean, I'd seen some of his work even before he was on the Contender Series, and he just seemed like this is just another featherweight. It was just another featherweight, kind of out on the East Coast. He's looked better and better. I didn't expect to hear his name again after he lost a pretty straightforward fight to Brendan Loughnane on the Contender Series, but he's looked better and better. And I mean, he had the better cardio in this fight, probably partly due to, I mean, we just talked about octagon jitters, on somebody's first UFC fight versus their second. I mean, that might have been part of it, but for a guy who's a pretty big framed featherweight, and he made jokes about not having muscles like Carlisle, but he's a pretty big featherweight. He seems to have it all.
Yeah.
Good wrestler, good striker, can definitely take care of himself on the mat. You said IQ. I mean, I think he definitely out IQ'd Carlisle tonight. Yeah, I'm mildly interested to see what this guy does next. He's in another of the 3 divisions where you have to do the most to even be knocking on the door of the top 15. He's only 31, so he's got some time to work at it. But yeah, he's a guy to watch.
Yeah, and as far as Carlisle, like, I definitely think he needs to control his energy, but it's so much easier said than done because of his style, because grappling is such a big part of his game, and he kind of needs to be a big part of his game, and you're instantly going to gas out, or you're going to make it more likely to gas out being such a heavy, wrestling game. I don't know how to fix that. Like, what does he do?
I don't know what he does. We've had this conversation before, but cardio, it's half how big your gas tank is, and it's half how hard you step on the gas. He's clearly a man in unbelievable physical shape. Like, the problem is not like his lung capacity or, his red blood cells. It is his work rate. And the thing is, you can have a frantic work rate as a striker, and it can work for 3 rounds if you're a featherweight or a bantamweight. You can't if your game requires you to work so hard for takedowns or to initiate scrambles. Like that bulldog joke. And normally I'm like, as soon as I see someone try something like that, I'm like, just let go, let it go. All you're doing is burning out your own arms. But this was one of the few times I thought it was actually had the opponents in danger. But even so, he burned so much energy there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the beginning of the end. Like, once Algeo got his head out, Carlisle turned into a completely different fighter. Now, to Carlisle's credit, he definitely had a Josh Parisian type performance where he was gassed out, but he was still fighting hard. It wasn't one of these guys that just suddenly curls up and it's over. Which we'll get to a fighter later on that I felt like kind of did that. But Carlisle, there's something about him that he's got to make a major change. I don't know what it is. If he's got to thin himself out, if he's change a weight class, maybe he has to go up. I don't know. Algeo did call out a fight with Giga Chikasi after the fight. That think would be a really fun fight if that actually happens. Anyways, before that, we did not. Oh, did you? I can't remember. Did you pick Algeo or no?
No, you did. I picked Carlisle.
Okay, so I just want to put it, because these were I did terrible in my picks, so I just want to mention these back-to-back upset picks I did do, because there's not a lot of high points, but I think we both did. You also picked Norma Dumont to beat Ashley Evans Smith, correct?
Yeah, and I felt pretty strong about it, and
she looked fantastic.
She did. I mean, she looked better than I expected her to. I expected her to win, but I didn't expect it to be just such a complete washing. I mean, I know that the UFC booth talked, about her stand-up background and her kicks and like her wushu stylings, but I said it on the preview. Like, looking at her fights coming up, she was most comfortable when. I mean, she would strike for a while, but she was clearly in her comfort zone when she could just bully people to the ground and go to work there. Good ground game, good ground and pound, and nice submission game. And that's kind of how it worked out. Like, even against about as decorated a wrestler as you can get on the women's side in the UFC right now, just clearly had the advantage on the ground.
Yeah, so Dumont won unanimous decision. All 3 judges scored at 30-26, and it might not even been that close. I mean, she was teeing off on the feet. As you mentioned, she was winning the wrestling exchanges. She was a physically bigger girl. I I was most impressed with was how quick she was, and she was just going over the top with combination like counter hook, counter overhand right, and she picked up the timing of Ashley Evans Smith about midway through the first round, and then it was just became a whitewash after that. And I feel good about Dumont moving forward in the division.
So do I. I feel better about her than I expected, and it's a division that needs people to step up. It's kind of like men's light heavyweight in that it was the best division, like at least through the top 10 for a long time, but then all those people started to kind of age out, or just get worn out, and all of a sudden it's a division really in need of new blood at the top.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she gets a couple wins and she could be fighting for the title. Before that, we had a lot of upsets on the evening. This is the one that surprised me most, and that was Jonathan Pierce beating Kai Kamaka by second round submission. So we just talked about Josh Parisian. We just talked about Spike Carlisle being extremely gassed out and fighting on. I didn't see that with Kai Kamaka. He slowed down. He was bullying. Like, he looked great the first 2 minutes of the fight. He was bullying Jonathan Pierce, and then Jonathan Pierce just kind of bit down on his mouthpiece, started throwing a lot of kicks, kind of bullied him back, and Kai Kamaka just kind of folded after that. Do you agree with that assessment or no?
I completely agree with it, and also you and I both had Kamaka in this one, but as soon as by the last third of the first round, Pierce clearly had the wrestling advantage, and as soon as that was the case, I was like, oh no, this one's in the bag.
Yeah, because he was winning this. What surprised me was not only was he winning the wrestling, which, especially considering Kamaka has an NCAA background. I mean, they both do. So I can understand Pierce maybe winning the wrestling. I was really surprised that he was actually winning the striking exchanges too. He just outpaced him with the kicks and the takedown attempts.
Yeah, not much I can add to that.
Now, in fairness to Kamaka, he did take the fight on short notice. It was supposed to be Sean Woodson. They got changed about a week ago, so he's taken on a very short notice. But it was a terrible performance by Kai Kamaka for a guy, Jonathan Pierce, who got blown out the water by Joe Lozon in like under 2 minutes. 2019 Joe Lozon.
And this Jonathan Pierce, I would like to have seen him against Sean Woodson tonight. Yeah, because I thought of him as basically a bounce back fight for Sean Woodson, but I would like to have seen him against Sean Woodson tonight. That would have been a hell of a fight, and I'm not sure how it turned out.
Yeah, and this Jonathan Pierce, I think, would have ran through Joe Lozon. Now, that makes me wondering, they talked about having shoulder surgery. Like, was he badly injured in that Lozon fight? Because he looked like a completely different person.
Yeah, I don't even know.
So that is the main card. We covered all the main cards. Let's go to the prelims. The headline prelim fight, Martin Day versus Anderson Dos Santos. Dos Santos wins by first round submission by guillotine. Battle of striker versus grappler. Day wanted to work his outside distance game. Dos Santos was kind of throwing haymakers, trying to close the distance to get a takedown. He did get a takedown. There was a fun scramble. At one point, Martin Day reverses it, goes in for a double leg takedown on Dos Santos, leaves his head open, and Dos Santos jumps on a guillotine, chokes him out. Really beautiful submission. I don't know what else you can talk about this fight.
Not much you can say about it. I had Day going into this one. Even if I thought Dos Santos might have had a higher ceiling at one point, just because Day is such a physical matchup problem. Dos Santos had been away for like over a year, and I just thought, he's not going to be ready to come back in and face a guy like Day, and I just figured he'd be frustrated, stuck on the outside for a lot of this fight, and he wasn't, not at all. He looked really good.
Yeah, and Martin Day is now 0-3 in the UFC, and he's had moments in all 3 fights. Like, that's what's funny about it. Like, at one point he was probably winning all 3 fights, but he does not have a win, and I'm sure this might be the last we see of Martin Day in the UFC. Before that, Gina Mazzani beat the piss out of Rachel Ostovich. She ended up getting a late stoppage, 3rd-round TKO, with 2 back-to-back beautiful kicks to the liver, front teep kicks to the liver. This was Mazzani's first fight down at 125, and she looked noticeably bigger and just a better game plan. I loved her. She had great output. I thought the biggest difference in the fight was that both girls kind of like to wrestle. For some reason, Ostovich didn't use her wrestling at all in this fight. But I love that Mazzani was initiating the clinch and the takedowns. So when there was battle in this, she was on the offense. And she was just muscling Ostovich down. In fairness to Ostovich did have one of the best back take transitions I've ever seen in her escape from the north-south choke. It looked like Mazzani was about to lock in a north-south choke, and then Ostovich, with insane flexibility, if people haven't seen this, she was laying on her back. If you know what a north-south choke is, so kind of like their heads near each other, but facing opposite. Guys, you figure out north-south.
Yeah.
And Ostovich wrapped her legs up, somehow got her feet in between the hips, like you would putting the hooks in on her, pulled her head out and took it back. It was absolute insanity. So, but that was about it for Rachel Ostovich. The rest of the fight, she got smoked. Yeah. I'm watching this fight, and what was frustrating me is when if Mazzani was taking Ostovich down and Ostovich was getting up, she just kept getting mat returned. And I'm like, has she never... Like, no one ever showed her how to hook a leg when you get lifted up, which Bill Algeo did against Spike Carlisle. Like, it's very, very extremely simple to not get mat return. There's ways to get mat return, but not just lifting up and slamming back down. That was very frustrating watching, because I was just like, this is like my like 5-year-old knows how to not have that happen to him. I'm not joking. My 5-year-old knows that move. That was a little frustrating.
Ironic that you say that, since she is also coached by her dad.
Well, there you go. I guess maybe I'm a better coach than her dad is. Mazzani. So one big storyline of Mazzani was that she went to Gloria May in Kansas City. Her and her boyfriend Tim Elliott moved out there. It's beating Rachel Ostovich, so I don't want to get too excited. But do you feel good about Gina Mazzani at 125?
I do. I felt good about Gina Mazzani at 125 coming into this. I thought it would solve a lot of the problems with her game. And normally I'm the last person to say a fighter who's, been going through a rough patch to drop in weight class. I think it, in most cases, does not make things better. Sometimes makes things worse. Mazzani is the rare exception where I thought, okay, this could actually solve a lot of her problems. I thought it was ironic that the UFC booth was talking about how, even at 135, she was a really strong woman. I was like, no, that's exactly the opposite of the truth. She has a game that runs off of being the stronger fighter, and she wasn't stronger than most of the bantamweight she was facing, and it was a problem. As soon as she got in against a flyweight, I mean, not every flyweight she faces is going to be Ostovich, who made her look like Rustam Habilov for 15 minutes, but she absolutely was the bully, and I think she'll be the bully in a lot of fights at 125, and it will be to her advantage.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you. The 2 girls she faced right before this was Julia Avila and Macy Chiasson, 2 girls who are historically known for their bullying style. 2 girls who can just mash you up in the clinch in an area that she's supposed to be good at. I mean, Macy Chiasson is huge. How she makes bantamweight is insane, and Julia Avila is just a killer. So, I like that. I like Mazzani. She looked great. You mentioned changing weight classes. Right before that, fight, Sue Majari made his flyweight debut against Malcolm Gordon, and it only took him, I believe, 44 seconds to pick up the win as he won by first round knockout. I'm glad that he did get a bonus because this was probably the most dominant. I mean, it was only 44 seconds. This was a flawless victory. This kid's 24 years old, and he just picked apart Gordon right away, blasting with a straight left right down the pipe. He's 24. He's 5'8" flyweight. You got to be excited about that. China MMA is continuing to grow. This could be kind of, we already have the face of female Chinese MMA. Maybe we can start getting the male face of Chinese MMA as Majari he looks like such a promising prospect. Do you agree with me or disagree?
I agree. He looked fantastic. I had him by decision in this fight, and that was really just a case of me being nervous about him moving down to flyweight. He's a much superior fighter to Gordon in every way. Like if this was Sue Mudarji's second fight at flyweight, I would have had him by first round finish. I put him down by decision, just thinking, okay, maybe his body's not going to love this. Maybe he's going to win the first round and then kind of have to hang on and dig deep. He didn't. He looked great. Physically, he looked about the same, honestly, which is crazy because he looked like a praying mantis at 135.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Gordon was an appropriate first test for a very young prospect moving down in weight. It's only going to get harder from here, and there are going to be some physical bruisers as he moves up the ranks. But as of right now, I'm super excited for him.
Yeah, me too. It's funny because we both picked him to win, which is not really going on a limb because I think he was a big favorite. But I think he was like, when we were making our predictions on Wednesday, I think he was like a negative 330 favorite. He actually closed as an even bigger favorite than that. He closed at a negative 365 favorite. I actually remember me saying that I thought the line should have been closer than the negative 330. And then you mentioned about him moving down, and I was like, oh, I didn't even realize he's moving down. Then I'm like, maybe it should be like negative 180. So, yes, I picked the winner right, but I don't think either one of us saw it being this much of a wipeout. And, I'm glad he got a performance bonus. 24 years old. He's really, really promising. And the opening fight of the night, Luke Sanders versus Nate Manaz. Manaz, I might be saying his name wrong. Manaz won by second round submission, kind of a club and sub, as he clubbed Luke Sanders and locked on the rear naked choke. I was taking notes on this, and I kind of always, my note taking, it seems like every event, the early note taking is a lot more thorough, and then as I go on, it's like I fade with my notes. So I got a whole bunch of notes on this fight. But what I want to say about this is all my notes was positive Luke Sanders. And I was like, wow, he looked good. He was picking up apart, lots of kicks, good movement. He was back in Manez's trip against defense. I was like, Manez's strategy was terrible. Like back against defense, he just kept trying to do a step back right hand. And I'm like, man, you can't keep doing the same move. You're not getting it until he did. And then he blasted Luke Sanders and put him out. This guy's now 2-0 in the UFC. And I did not think he should have won his debut against Johnny Munoz. I think when I said that on the breakdown, I don't know if you remember, I said that I didn't remember his fight. I had to rewatch the Munoz fight to even remember who he was. Right. He's now 2-0 in UFC, and I'm still not excited about this guy at all.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that like tells me this is a future contender. And I mean, he's young. And he's 2-0 in the UFC, which, a lot of people are not, that we'll probably talk about tonight. But, it just kind of feels like smoke and mirrors so far. I picked Sanders, and, I mean, I was wrong. He lost by finish. But this, I expected kind of a wild back and forth fight where both guys probably had their moments, which did turn out to be the case. Sanders was doing well in the early going, had him in a little bit of trouble, and Manez held on and impressive finish. So I'll definitely give him that.
All right, so we have covered all 10 fights. I mean, it was a shorter card due to all the cancellations. also not the most star-studded card, so we went much quicker than I think we've ever had before. Let's get to the fun stuff. We got the Bulls and the Bears and the cut list. Do you have a preference on what we go with first?
I always like to do the cut list first.
All right, I'm glad you said that. I have a huge cut list. I got 5 nominations.
Wow. Then let me go first, since mine will probably overlap yours anyway. Okay. First one to go. Ashley Evans Smith.
She's also on my list.
She's lost 4 of 5. The one that she won was not that dominant a win, and it's over somebody who was washed out of the UFC. So basically, she's not beaten anybody of UFC level in like 4 years or more. She's been a public relations nightmare in the meanwhile, getting caught on camera like stealing COVID supplies. So just let her go be a problem somewhere else.
Yeah. Hey guys, just so you, sorry to interrupt you. Just so you the cut list, we're saying who we would cut, not who we think will get cut. Because I don't think Ashley Evans Smith would get cut based on just her Instagram pictures and stuff. So I don't think she'll get cut, but this is who we would cut. And actually, while I was saying that, I've actually removed one person from my cut list because I thought they were on a losing streak, but they actually had a win. So I was actually going to cut Luke Sanders, but I didn't realize he was actually had a win before the Menez fight. So he's actually just for some reason I thought his record was worse than it is. He's 2-4 of his last 6, but I'm gonna say he dodges a bullet this one time. But okay, sorry to interrupt you. Carry on.
No, you're good. And I would say Rachel Ostovich. Ostovich can go. Just at this point, she doesn't do anything at a high enough level to threaten UFC level fighters, and the things she doesn't do well are huge glaring problems. Like she's just not UFC level, and I don't know if she ever will be, but there are plenty of places where she could go ply her trade and try to come back.
Yeah, I mean she's 4-6, so she also made my list. But everything I said about Ashley Evans Smith, I also say about Rachel Ostovich. We try to be professional here, but Rachel Ostovich is a lot more known for her looks than her fighting ability. She has a famous picture where she's wearing a ring card costume or uniform, whatever you call it. Like, it wouldn't shock me if she was a ring card girl one day.
There you go.
Who else you got?
That's it for me. I just had the 2.
All right. I got 2 more to add to that list. Martin Day. He's 0-3 in the UFC now. I got to cut him.
I feel bad. Like I feel like the guy just has a spark of life every time out, but for one thing, he's only 8-5 in his entire career. It's not like he racked up 30 wins on the regionals. I'm fine with that. Martin the Spartan can, he can make space for someone else.
And my last guy, who I don't think he'll be cut because of the division, but Malcolm Gordon is 0-2 in the UFC with 2 first-round stoppage losses. Now, he's going against 2 guys I like. So, you know what? Actually, I just talked myself out of it. Based on the division, and he's going against 2 guys, I'll give him one more shot, but Malcolm Gordon definitely is close to the chopping block. So, I'll say he gets a pass. So
it's Thanksgiving.
It's Thanksgiving. It's for the
you just pardoned a turkey. All right.
Yeah. So based on our list, only 2 people will get cut because we have to agree on both of them. So we're saying the 2 females, Ashley Evans Smith and Rachel Ostovich, should be cut. Bulls and the Bears. Let's start with let me explain the Bulls and the Bears. Bulls and Bears is a stock market reference. When a stock is doing good, they call it a bull market. When it's going bad, they call it a bear market or bear stock. So we do it kind of hockey style, 3 stars. So 1, 2, and 3, as in number 1 is the biggest, number 3 is the least of your 3. Bulls. You want to start with the Bulls or the Bears?
Oh, let's start with the Bulls.
All right. Do you want to go first, second?
I'll go ahead and go first.
All right, good. I'll let you go first.
All right. My number 3 bull is going to be Bill Algeo. Just win or lose, he just looked better than I expected. I expected the general dynamic that Carlisle would win the early going and then have to hang on and we'd see in the third round whether he was going to win or lose. I expected it to be a bit like the Billy Quarantillo fight that I actually thought Carlisle won. Aljo looked better than I expected. Win or lose, he had Spike Carlisle figured out and was kind of starting to pull ahead even before Carlisle really started to gas out. So I'm excited for him. He did exactly what you're supposed to do at that level. Your second UFC fight coming off a loss. My number 2 bull is Anthony Smith. Smith, he had to know that his back was against the wall, not in terms of his job, but at least in terms of being ever considered a top contender again. Win or lose, he had to know that people might possibly be writing him off. If he got the crap beat out of him by Devin Clark for 3 or 4 rounds and pulled out a Hail Mary submission, that kind of thing. Or if he got just kind of a really narrow split decision in a close, lousy fight. But instead, he just walked out and showed a very promising contender that there are levels to this. He was basically a step ahead of Clark the whole night. And yeah, he looked fantastic. Definitely bull market if you're buying stock in Anthony Smith. My number 1 bull, weight loss. Weight loss is the answer to all of your problems if you're a fighter. I am not somebody who normally believes that. I normally argue against it, but people dropping in weight, not only, did they uniformly win, but they looked great physically in terms of execution. Sumu Darji looked fantastic, looked as sharp as he ever had at bantamweight. Gina Mazzani looks like she will have a path to win fights the way she likes to win fights at flyweight, in a way that she wasn't able to a lot of the time at bantamweight. Even Norma Dumont obviously got steamrolled by one of the biggest featherweight women in the world in her UFC debut. Drops not all the way to bantamweight, but she gave it the old college try. I'm sure she'll make 135 next time, and she was the one doing the steamrolling. And then even our heavyweights, a little side note going into Parker Porter's first fight was that he had to cut from like 295 pounds or something when he got the call for the fight. He came in slimmed down. He said he was slimmed down. He looked better. And I mean, in a fight where he definitely was the guy with the better cardio, you can't help but credit that a little bit. So my number 1 bull is weight loss.
All right. So we actually have a similar pick. We'll get to that in a second. So my top 3, I'll go to number 3. My number 3, Miguel Baeza. This is a guy who's now 3-0 in the UFC. He's got all 3 stoppages. People talk about him fighting a top 15 opponent next, so I think his stock rose greatly. And both of us picked against him. He ran through a fighter that we both thought was pretty good. Co-main event match actually gets a little more stock risen for that, a little more notoriety. So Baeza is my number 3 bull. My number 2, similar to yours, was people dropping in weight class. So I actually had that one down too. But my number 1, and we already mentioned this on the show, underdogs. Underdogs went 6-4. So the underdogs who won on this card: Parker Porter, Bill Algeo, Norma Dumont, Jonathan Pierce, Anderson Dos Santos, and Nate Menes. They went, all those 6 people were all underdogs come fight night, and they all pulled out a victory. Let's move over to the Bears. I will go first this time. These are people who did not have a good night. Spike Carlisle. He's now 0-2 in the he's lost back-to-back fights in the UFC. Gassed out bad. Probably lost both fights because of his gas tank. His stock is plummeting. Number 2, Rachel Ostovich. But not just her, but her corner. At one point during the broadcast, they said, we're going to listen into Rachel Ostovich corner. And all you saw is her drink water. Her cornerman did not say a single word to her. They forgot to pull out the stool for her, and the entire round was wasted without anything said to her. Not a good night for them. But the biggest loser of the night is Hawaiian MMA altogether, as the Hawaiian fighters went 0-3. That was Rachel Ostovich, Martin Day, and Kai Kamaka. They went back to back to back, 3 fights in a row. All 3 fights the Hawaiian fighters lost. So not a good day for Hawaiian MMA. Who are your bears, Ben?
Okay, one of my bears was Carlisle, and you already said it as well as I could have. Number 2, Josh Parisian. You know, he came in with a certain amount of fan and hardcore fan. You know, fans hardcore enough to have watched Dana White's Contender Series, but a certain amount of fan love behind him, just with the feeling that this is a guy who was probably overdue for his shot. And he's going to get plenty more chances, especially at heavyweight. And unless you just show absolutely nothing, you're probably going to get 3 tries. But nonetheless, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And he just really disappointed, not only by losing and not only by losing to someone who himself had not shown much yet, but it just, the best you can say of it is that he gutted it out. And, you know, he showed a lot of heart, but not a lot of lungs. And like I say, he'll get another chance, but his stock is definitely down right now in a division where anybody is 4 wins away from a title shot. You know, like it's a bummer for him that he didn't make a better first impression. And number 1, Devin Clark. It's a rough look.
Yeah.
You know, it is as much as the light heavyweight top 10 is kind of aging out and beating each other to a pulp, it's still hard to get in against one of those guys. I mean, we were just talking about what's next for Smith, and like it was easy to rattle off like 3 guys who've just been waiting in line for a shot at someone like him. So Clark passed up a rare opportunity here, and he's going to have to do a lot before somebody wants to give him another. I mean, if he'd beaten Anthony Smith tonight, people would be talking about, hey, let's see him against an Alexander Rakic type. You know, like there'd be no choice but to vault him further up the top 10. As it is, he's probably going to have to win 2 or 3 more in dominating fashion before his name even gets back into the discussion. So you're talking about you've derailed your career by a whole year or 2. So he is my number 1 bear for the night.
Yeah, and this is a guy who went from main event. His next fight could be on the prelims. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he falls off that much. Last question. Let's give the grade for the card. I go first this time. I'm giving it a C+. There was a lot of stoppages, which I liked, which helps the score. There was a lot of upsets, which I like, help the score. However, I feel like there is a cap without the star potential, you know, or the star power. Didn't have much changes in rankings. Not even, I think there was 1 ranked fighter the entire card. So C+ is the best I could do. What'd you score the card?
I'll give it a straight C. There was 1 ranked fighter on the entire card, and he won in 2.5 minutes. So the overwhelming majority of the night was watching unranked fighters bash on each other, which is no problem at all. I mean, I watched tons of regional MMA and LFA and Invicta that doesn't have a single ranked fighter on it, but I don't usually have to pencil out my whole evening for it, because on top of everything else, even though all these fights fell off, we ended up with a 10-fight card. The pacing was just dreadful. Dead air between all these cards. It just felt like watching something on FS1 again.
Yeah, good call. I mean, the card, so the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones boxing match was going on at the same time. We had the co-main event and main event go on after that event ended. So that shows you how bad it was as far as time ending. Guys, we'll be back next week. We'll be recapping UFC Hermansson versus Vettori. We're hoping that's the case. That is the new main event. That is actually the 3rd main event for next week. It was originally Hermansson versus Darren Till. Then it became Hermansson versus Kevin Holland. Then it became Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. And next week it'll probably be Hermansson versus Donald Cerrone. Who knows? But we'll be back to recap it anyways. He's Ben Duffy. I'm Keith Shillan. We'll see you then.